Kendall punched in her husband's number, feeling the frustration build as she glanced at the rapidly cooling dinner. She'd been waiting over half an hour for him to get home from work. "But where are you?" she demanded. "You swore you'd be here on time." "Kendall, something urgent came up at work," Asher replied. "You'll get peanuts for this overtime, if anything at all," she snapped, her patience thinning. "Our loans won't just disappear on their own." "Seriously," Asher said sharply. Recognizing the unspoken judgment in his tone, she hung up, fuming. Kendall knew Asher resented her being out of a job while their debts piled up. She had left her last job in a blaze of indignation after a heated argument with her bosses. They'd promised her one amount, but only coughed up half of it, leaving her no choice but to quit in protest. Experienced as a project manager though she was, finding new work in their city had been like searching for a needle in a haystack. All right, Amaya had been throwing around a subject they'd been chewing over for ages. "I suppose agreeing is inevitable," mused Kendall. Meanwhile, Asher toiled away in customer support for an internet service provider. His main gig, visiting clients and mending their tech issues. The pay wasn't great, and since he was the sole breadwinner, his income barely scratched the surface of his debts, let alone afforded a comfortable lifestyle. Clearly, not exactly a walk in the park. That's the reason he pushed his wife to land a job, pronto. A week down the road, Kendall snagged a spot at a creative studio. Just like before, she took charge of various client projects. But Asher didn't really sweat the details. He was simply relieved that finances would be a bit less of a strain. Asher harbored the hope that they would soon be blessed with children. The loan they were slogging to repay was taken out to kickstart his own venture. He yearned for independence, to boost his earnings, and ensure that his family never wanted for anything. But, alas, the business tanked, leaving them in debt to the banks. Being the conscientious man he was, Asher grasped that the timing for kids wasn't right amidst their current troubles. He had to reluctantly shelve his entrepreneurial dreams and stick to his regular job for the time being. The weeks drifted by. In no time, Kendall was raking in a good salary at her new job, which was pretty impressive for their town. She even had some spare cash to splurge on new makeup. She had almost forgotten what living comfortably felt like, so the perks of her new gig were a pleasant surprise. With these changes, the dynamic between the couple also saw a positive shift. Asher no longer placed undue pressure on Kendall, and the home environment got a breath of fresh air. Time zipped by, a full 3 months disappearing like a whisper. One evening after a grueling shift, Asher dragged himself home, utterly spent and weary. He'd been on his feet all day, zipping through the bustling streets of the city. All he could think about was kicking off his shoes, devouring a good meal, and collapsing into bed. As he shuffled into the apartment, Kendall welcomed him with a sunny smile, planted a kiss on his cheek, and ushered him into the kitchen. To his amazement, she had ordered sushi and set everything up attractively on the table. His eyes widened in surprise. "Are we celebrating something?" he queried. With a mischievous grin and a twinkle in her eye, Kendall nodded. "Indeed, we are. Today, a major client signed on with us. And guess what? I've been put in charge of their account. So it looks like we're set," she declared triumphantly, producing an envelope stuffed with cash. Asher opened the envelope, rapidly estimated the amount, and his gaze flicked back to Kendall. Astounded, it baffled him how, in her usual role, she could now be pulling in such an impressive sum. Regardless, he was overjoyed by her news and promptly congratulated her. With this turn of events, their financial burdens could soon be a thing of the past. A new client that they had recently acquired brought a significant boost to the wife's income. She began earning multiple times more than her husband, albeit with longer work shifts. Now, she was even working on weekends occasionally and arriving home a bit late on other days. One evening, it was already 9 p.m., and the wife hadn't returned home. Concerned, Asher decided to give her a call. Answering in a weary voice, she assured him that she was on her way. having taken a taxi, and would be there shortly. When she finally arrived home, her husband was taken aback. She was wearing bold and vibrant makeup, a departure from her usual natural look. Asher couldn't help but raise an eyebrow and asked, "Did you come straight from work?" Kendall glanced at the hallway mirror and replied, slightly embarrassed, "Oh, we had an event at a client's place, and I got invited too. I completely forgot to mention it to you." She quickly headed towards the bathroom, reassuring him, "I'll wash it off right away. Don't worry. It's not something that will happen regularly. You know what I mean." Asher couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. Normally, Kendall would confide in him about everything, yet there were now events she only disclosed after the fact. What if it wasn't work-related at all? This sudden surge in her career had set off his suspicions. From that moment onward, the man's doubts only continued to grow. One fine day, Asher found himself seated at his workplace. With only a few incoming calls, he was occupied with occasional client inquiries. Not far from him sat his longtime acquaintance, Duke. The two had developed a good rapport over the years. Duke, with an air of mystery, exclaimed, "I've got something to show you," seizing the moment when no one was nearby, and his work phone remained silent. He discreetly fetched his phone and swiftly entered the website's name into the browser. In a matter of seconds, explicit images of scantily clad women began to flicker across the screen. "Goodness, Duke, you really browse stuff like that while on the job?" Asher laughed astonishedly. "Hold on, that's not what I wanted to show you," Duke interrupted, completely absorbed in his search and never taking his eyes off the screen. "Take a look at this beauty. She's new here, but I'm already a fan." Duke handed Asher his phone, revealing a live broadcast of a young woman adorned in combat makeup and an alluring outfit, gradually undressing. Asher continued to chuckle, but then abruptly fell silent. Suddenly, he recognized the woman. It was his wife. "What on earth is this?" Asher barely managed to utter, his voice filled with bewilderment. "It's a webcam. Ever heard of it? It's when you enter some girl's room online, throw her some cash, and she does whatever you ask. It's a piece of cake." His colleague explained casually, "One time, I asked her to." Asher's attention drifted away from his colleague's words as he stared dumbfounded at the screen in front of him. There, his wife Kendall flirted shamelessly with her audience, raking in the money. She seemed willing to do anything that other men requested of her. Anger and shame surged through Asher as he realized his wife's actions were being showcased to countless other individuals. Was she that desperate to avoid a regular job that she chose this path? Luckily, his coworker had no knowledge of his wife, and none of their acquaintances were aware of Kendall's online activities. Countless thoughts raced through his mind as he contemplated his next move. It would have been simpler for Asher if his wife had simply cheated on him. An affair with another man, a straightforward conversation. But in this situation, would it be considered cheating? Instead, he felt frustrated and enraged that his wife had stooped to this level. He made up his mind to confront her about it later today. The man arrived home ahead of his wife, silently moving to the kitchen and taking a seat at the table. A while later, Kendall returned from her job. "Kendall, we need to have a word. I discovered something today," Asher stated gravely, gesturing towards the chair next to him. "What is it, darling?" His wife responded with concern, settling into the chair opposite him. "I uncovered the truth about where you actually work," he continued sternly after a brief pause. "I came across the website where you stream. Can you explain why you have been deceitful?" he asked, fixing his gaze on her intently. At first, Kendall was bewildered, but she quickly understood there was no dodging the conversation. "I was on the hunt for a straightforward 9-to-5, she confessed. "But every place I tried either offered me peanuts or had terrible conditions. Here I don't need to bust my chops, and the salary is solid." When Amaya mentioned her job, I was skeptical too, but then she glanced downwards, avoiding eye contact. "Don't misunderstand me. But you've been upfront about needing the money, she added softly. So, you're saying our neighbor nudged you into this gig? That's outrageous. No way. It's indecent. Do you seriously want folks to see you like that? Have you considered my feelings? What will everyone think? My husband's temper was visibly fraying at the edges. I'm not having any affairs, she responded, looking squarely at him without a trace of embarrassment. What obscenity are you talking about? I'm not being unfaithful. I don't want my wife involved in such things, Asher retorted firmly. There are plenty of other ways, but this is too extreme for me. Kendall was speechless for a moment. Then, with a steady tone, she revealed that after experiencing this kind of income, she couldn't fathom returning to a regular job. It met her needs perfectly, and she simply couldn't see eye to eye with her husband on the matter. Asher never anticipated that this particular matter would become a major obstacle for their relationship. However, that is precisely what occurred. Each person had their own opinions regarding what was permissible and what was not. Since it wasn't a simple domestic issue that could be resolved through compromise, the couple decided to separate. Asher believed that it was only fair for his neighbor to know how much his wife, Amaya, earned. When he informed his neighbor about it, he clumsily feigned ignorance, as though he had made a mistake. It soon became clear to Asher that his neighbor was already aware of his wife's activities and had no issue with it. He thought to himself, let them handle it themselves. Asher found his wife's behavior to be completely unacceptable. Regardless of the amount of money she earned, it wasn't worth it to him. He found it utterly repulsive. Additionally, her reputation could easily be tarnished at any moment, and Asher wanted no part in it. In his future relationships, he would be especially cautious when discussing such delicate matters.